Welcome back to Lit versus Genre, everybody. I am Steve.
And I am Jeff.
And, okay, so penultimate episode of Marvel Disney's Moon Knight. Jeff, let's just dive into it. What'd you think? What did you think? How are you feeling it?
Just overall, just gut reactions. I was happy. I thought it was a return to form. I thought it, at least while I was watching, I thought of something you said was it was entertaining. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't bored, right? Like it was sort of one thing right after the next, after the next, after the next, and that does speak to something you had also talked about before, which is the benefit of these, seasons being shorter. It really can potentially lead to much faster pacing because you got to do some really tight storytelling. If you're only, given 6 episodes, for instance, right? Now, I'm sure there's many that would like more episodes of a show they really enjoy. And I don't know how I feel about this one yet. I think, after next episode, I'll be able to say that better. But overall, just in terms of base reaction, I was pretty happy.
Jeff, to that point, how are they wrapping this up in one more episode?
No, that's where I gave myself that out, right? Because the pacing on this episode was great. We got some, nice reveals and some nice character moments and some good emotional hits. But yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be. I know we're jumping all the way to predictions, but I think it'll be, he gets back in his body, conscious free by his wife, and that he battles Ethan Hawke victory, and there isn't the rising of this other god. But maybe there is because it seems like they're already sending souls to the dead. So but that's overall. I think they can do that relatively
I,
quickly.
I don't mean to
Honestly,
say that as a criticism. I think that's a wonderful question to have before the
that's
last
true.
episode of your
That's a good
show,
point.
just to be like,
Well,
how in the world are they going to do that? And
yeah.
that makes me really happy.
Yeah, I think the reason that maybe someone hearing that, myself included, might take it as like a potential negative is I do think they need to resolve it in a satisfying way. Now, obviously, anyone could say that's true of every show ever that it should
Right,
resolve
yeah.
in a satisfying way, right? But I do think if it's extra mysterious how it could possibly happen, I think it's because in our brains it feels like there's still a pretty big checklist of things that we expect to happen, or something that makes us understand why things have happened the way they have, and we recognize that that's a pretty big hurdle, and so ideally they can jump that hurdle. But I agree if they can, yeah, I mean then it's amazing.
Exactly. Like the other side of it is you don't want to know how they're going to do
Right.
it. You don't want to be staring at that last episode going, oh, clearly X, Y, and Z are going to happen, and there are certain, again, especially with genre things, certain things that you just feel like are going to happen. They're going to defeat
Sure.
Ethan Hawke and the bad
Right.
Egyptian, blah, 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 whatever. So, like, to kind of end us where they ended us in this episode and to go like, man, I'm just not even sure what's next is
Right.
is a really good feeling. I think it's a good thing to do if they can pull it off, obviously.
Completely, and also I would agree. Like, how much do we care, right? Like, if we think, oh yeah, Ethan Hawke's gonna lose or whatever, right? I mean, the action in this show is pretty good, yeah, but it's not like Ethan Hawke himself does a lot of fighting. I mean, the Ethan Hawke fighting we're getting is in this episode with him, and in the last episode with him as
Mm.
this doctor. You know what I mean? That is Ethan Hawke fighting, which is cool, right? And so I think they're smartly going more the internal battle, right? This is more conflict with self or multiple selves, if we will, right? Um, and deciding what's going to happen to Steven, right? Everyone's favorite, and what's Mark going to choose? Like if he's really spoilers, massive spoilers, if he's really in heaven, the field of reeds right now, is he going to want to leave? Stuff like that. So I think that's much more interesting. And that's sort of crazy for me to say because I'm totally the magic system big fights guy, right? But it feels like that's what they've set up here. And since they haven't set up a big bad who's awesome at fighting, then I'm excited to see that fight. I think this is a more compelling tack for them to take. So that's why I say I feel it's a return to form because I felt very satisfied overall watching it like I had with the early episodes.
This was my favorite episode, like easily, like not even
Yeah,
close, really. I thought there were so
first was
many
pretty good, but
moments,
yeah.
huh?
I was just saying, I think the first is a pretty good
Yeah,
contender,
it's
but I
good.
agree.
Yeah.
This one's got a lot of moments because you got both of them there, right?
Exactly. You have them both there throughout the whole thing. The conflict's really between them, and there were so many beats where they nail the emotion, where I felt more emotion in this than like any other episode, and they did it so many good things. I feel like I'm like kind of gushing, but
You
I,
are. Look at
I
this.
I guess the first thing, the thing that like kind of worried me, and I know we don't give like a lot of recaps in these. We're always just assuming that people have watched the thing and they know what's going on. So if you haven't watched it, go watch it because nothing I say is gonna make sense for like
Right.
the next half an hour if you don't do that. But when they set up, I started getting a worried feeling when they were setting up the brother, because we also talked about this in previous podcasts that I am not a huge fan of the trauma
Right.
conflict, which is never really a conflict because it's not with anybody else, right? It's just like, oh, I have this trauma. I feel guilty for my brother. And I was like, oh, that's what it's going to be. It's just going to be that. And I was ready to be very disappointed because it felt like it was going that way. But then it's not about the brother at all. And it's about the mom. And I'm like, oh, I am on board with this. And like, so that, yeah, that is like the first one that made me like really feel like, oh, they made the right turn there. Now this is between the characters, and that this is the birth of the other personalities, like this
Right.
sadness about his mom and this. And I also love that like I feel like they teetered over a little bit into demonizing the mom. There could have been, maybe with some more time, you understand more of her perspective, and it would be more of a tragic situation. She kind of goes over into like a bully in this
Yeah.
sort of villainous, not villainous exactly. I mean, you can still see where she's coming from. You understand where that emotion would come from, but it seemed like a
Sure.
little
Sure.
over the top. Um, but just that, like, till the end, even with her being kind of so abusive, that he still feels guilty about her death and
Right.
feel and like wanted to
Street
go to the
Sweeper.
funeral but couldn't bring himself to go there. I think that also sold it, because it would be so easy for him just to be like, I hate my mom, or I
Right. Right.
whatever, and they just keep that complication going in there, and that's what makes you feel things. Like if you just
Yeah.
totally villainize the mom, nobody feels anything, right?
Right.
But if you
They made
leave
it
that
about him.
open,
Yeah.
yeah,
They made it
so
about his reaction to the mom as opposed to
exactly.
like, so it was cool. And then that's the moment that like the newest break had happened sort of 2 months ago, if you
Mm.
will. And that then he's staying in like his mom's flat or whatever, right? And got the job and all that stuff. So it sort of, catches you up to the beginning of the show. So,
Mm.
I liked all that. And obviously the scene very soon after that with Steven telling Mark, like, this is a scene we knew that was going to happen, but I thought it was delivered in just a really poignant and emotional way, with him saying it's not your fault, and just what that means about, telling yourself that something is not your fault. I really think they captured the importance of self-talk, which I feel is coming up more in our society these days, about positive self-talk, and addressing that, or maybe I'm just being exposed to it more these last few years. But I thought they did a really nice job of just showing it in an incredible, visceral way that I think can work for a lot of people to see and understand, and maybe even take into their own lives. So that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, the other part that made me feel stuff was just like Steven's realization that he wasn't the original, too. And that feeling like so kind of brutal.
And then his
To
mom was dead. That scene with the
Yeah, and that
phone.
scene with the phone was really good too. Ah,
What?
so much.
All the little things he says, like, "Oh, don't bother her," like, "Oh, she doesn't trust telemarketers," like, "Don't
Mm-hmm.
don't give her a call." And then later when he's just begging, basically he's like, please don't call her," and it's this idea, and we saw Mark doing the same thing, like refusing to want to go to that memory of, how we have parts of ourselves or our memories or experiences that we don't want to
Well,
address, we don't want to go through. It was
again,
really
what
cool.
what elevated that to me over the kind of blah trauma plot, because again I thought like, oh, something terrible was going to happen in that room at the very top, and like that's what he doesn't want Steven to see. And then to go, oh, he doesn't want Steven to know he's not the original. That was why he didn't want Steven to go into the thing. So you didn't just make it about, oh, there's the trauma I can't face,
Yeah,
which of course is part of this, but again,
sure.
part that I'm not particularly interested in. But the part where like, oh, Mark was thinking not about himself, and he was thinking about Steven, this other personality, and that would hurt him to know he wasn't the first, or what have you. I thought that was great.
I really like that too. Honestly, I would say they could have, I think, sold that a little bit more. That part was a touch confusing to me, but overall, I'm with you. I completely agree with your sentiment that it's so cool that it wasn't just Mark. I don't want to see a trauma. It was him protecting Steven like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. It's all those little moments, like you said, with him, with a mom, like not going to the funeral, out there crying, caring, him caring about Steven. It makes me care a lot more about Mark in a way that I hadn't before. I mean, we'd seen shades of this. Obviously, he had said things to show that he cared about his wife, right?
Mm.
So this isn't some like brand new character trait that they're just giving him. But to see it happen with these other people that we are invested in, especially Steven, is just great storytelling. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I thought it was really good. I still think the jokes were funny. The hippo lady was funny and enjoyable, fun to
Glad they
spend
stuck
time
with
with.
it. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
did it. And then they got the boat, they got the sands, they're going, right? Like we're riding the boat,
We're
we're on it,
going.
we're in the Egyptian underworld. Like I was super pleased when I saw that. I was like, yeah, let's rock this, you know? It
Mm.
felt like they delivered on that promise in also a satisfying way,
I think
right?
I've also brought up now the and I brought this up with you and one of our other buddies about like a video I think I'm thinking of doing about Pirates of the Caribbean and that the magic, the way it's presented in those movies. I can't help but think again this is like an influence on these guys writing this, because then we're on a
Yeah.
boat, and it was especially the moment, like there's lots in those Pirates of the Caribbean movies where everything hinges on kind of like a goofy physics of something, like everything's like very cause and effect in a kind of goofy way. And you know, they did that here where like Steven grabs the rudder and like uses it to tilt the bad guy's back so Mark doesn't get taken over the side. And I felt like that just feels very like Pirates of the Caribbean action setup to me in this.
For me, it was definitely when he pushed open the doors, when he's like, "Oh, these doors are just going to be various memories," and we had sort of seen that previously because that's how we found Steven. I was, of course, surprised we didn't get the third personality. I
Yeah,
really thought
so
when they
hot.
were going back and going to have to weigh stuff, it was going to be that. So in some
Mm.
ways, I was sad not to get the third personality, but I liked what they did instead, and I liked that bait and switch that I was expecting third. And then it's about this trauma, which, like you said, was kind of like, ah, but then they did other stuff with it, so it was cool.
I wonder
But
if the reveal of the third will be the like the cliffhanger a whole series or something.
really could be.
I
It could
don't
be. That could be really smart.
I've heard rumor from like other videos that like Oscar Isaac has not signed like a
Mhm.
continuing contract with this, that like this is what they have him for right now. Now obviously you could like do more later, but I wonder A, if that's true. I you know, I haven't done my own research about that, and B, if that is the case, would they end in Marvel fashion? They like to end everything on like some, if not a cliffhanger, then some tease for the
Something
future
right,
one, right?
right,
So
right. They'll
I
leave the door open, I'm sure.
all right, all
Like,
right.
yeah, yeah. I guess that if I knew that the show was already greenlit for a second season, they had him and everything, I would think yes, absolutely. A great ender would be the third personality or another
Mm,
god or something like that, right? Like sets or something from the comics. But with what you're saying here, then maybe we will get more of a kind of neater bow ending with again a tease, like a little thread flapping
yeah,
in the wind that we could continue on with.
yeah. I mean, it's weird because this show does not exist without him now at this point. I mean, like, what is so funny is that like I don't feel this way about any other Marvel character. And you know me, I'm like, recast Indiana Jones. Please don't trot out Harrison Ford, you know, at 80 or whatever he is for another one of these. Please spare me. And I feel the same way about Tony Stark. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. is great. I think somebody else could play it. I think
Well, I think
definitely.
it's been long enough. You know what I mean? Like it's we've had Tony for a while, right? You know, as is his current incarnation. I feel like he got a very full, fleshed out arc. So I feel like replacing him doesn't feel as bad. But yeah, I hear you with this one. I wouldn't want to see somebody else as
I
Moon
can't.
Knight.
Yeah, I can't imagine everybody else. It's like that feels like
Right.
this feels very indelible to me now
Right.
as his role. You know.
Well, but let's talk about Steven. If Steven's gone, I mean, I'm glad that there's only one episode left because even though I like Mark more, I don't know if how much I could be into just Mark Moon Knight, right? Because like so much of Moon Knight is the Mark Steven duality, um, and even potentially another one. So I will be interested to see what they do with that. I mean, I can't imagine they're going to leave him. They've got to know how popular
Right.
Steven is. So, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So unless there's anything else about the show, let's talk about this comic because this gives us a good segue into this comic. I believe we get, full spoiler warning, the death of Steven in both the show and this comic here, which was sort of interesting. And again, some other like parallels and stuff.
So real quick, I just want to say one last thing about the show. To
Mm,
show it would normally be like a logistics or magic system complaint, but that I think is a good example of it not mattering because everything else they're doing is so satisfying. So I mentioned that I was a little confused about the sort of moments in the scene where the other personality comes out. And I say that because it seemed like from what they were showing that Steven was a coping mechanism, right? To like bring back his younger brother and act like the poster and everything. Because then he reads the quote about like, when Steven's here, there's no need to fear. Like when danger's near, Steven won't
mm,
fear, something like that.
mm-hmm.
And so it seemed like when Mark got into a situation where he couldn't handle it anymore, right? He then switched to Steven and things were good. Um, and then Steven cleans up the room, but then the mom comes in, but then Mark's like, you don't need to see that. So then that made me like, well, wait a second. So is Mark turning into Steven when he's like overwhelmed, but not when he's actually around his mom, like hitting him? He goes back to being Mark because he didn't want Steven to see that. So I felt like there was a little bit of confusion of like when is Steven versus Mark actually used? Because Steven's saying, mom wasn't like that, and then Mark's like, I wanted you to have a good life. So it was a little strange there, but I just wanted to use that as an example that everything else surrounding it was really satisfying. And what we cared about was, again, Mark caring about Steven and Steven's reaction to it. So I think that's an example of, something that can be a little muddy. And I don't think people are, for the most part, gonna care, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not gonna be a thing, even if it is a little weird. And I think that's important because I was watching an anime recently, and it was about this guy who's like a speed demon guy. Kind of, he makes everything faster, and his philosophy is like faster is better. And he's got this little speech about how like anyone can write an amazing novel if you give them 10 years. What's amazing is someone who can create a story quickly. Like comics are like way better than any novel because of the stuff like that. But the reason I mention this is because for any writers out there, I do think it is easy to get so caught up and so nitpicky in like all the little writing things that we could watch videos about or people would talk about in writing classes. But at the essence, it's about telling a compelling story with emotions and characters that people care about. And if you're hitting those major beats, how much does the rest of that stuff really matter? And I think that ties back to what you say too about like you don't care about plot holes in a lot of cases and stuff like that because if other elements are satisfying. So I do just think it's worth it to note when there can be these like little oddities, but how much is that really affecting enjoyment overall? So we can all, who are writers, like not, not necessarily be as stressed, let a couple things go and get your good story out there so people can enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I was focused on at that point was the revelation, and I think it was a revelation that Mark wasn't hiding something extra also horrible that he did in that room. He was just trying to protect Steven, and I like that reversal of
I
my
like the difference.
expectation like so much that I didn't even think about that. I guess that like is he can't still be Steven when she starts to hit him, right? But whatever. Literally, I didn't even think about it until just now.
Not even thinking about it or even going back and thinking about it, like,
Uh,
who cares? Right?
yeah, yeah.
So that's just, that's why I wanted to talk about it. But cool, yeah,
Yeah.
let's talk about the wolf
All
man,
right.
space wolf,
Those
Moon Knight
space
comic.
wolves. Well, first of all,
Oh my
um,
goodness.
I really love the Space Wolves. I love everything
I know
about
you,
the parts with Space
I know
Wolf
you love
Mark.
photos. Yeah.
So,
And the
wait,
Times Square with wolves. It's great.
yeah, look at
It's
the
great.
Times Square, and then look at this big wolf on the screen, this like
I
wolf
know.
symbol.
I know.
I love this artist, man. I think he's just
Uh,
so fun. He's just like such ridiculous fun. And kind of coming to the end. So you read up to issue 9? You did get up to 9?
I read issues 7 and 8. I have not quite
Oh,
gotten
okay,
there.
okay,
I'm
okay.
at the cliffhanger with the, well, with the personalities basically,
Right, right.
which feels like a really good cliffhanger, and I'll definitely
Mm-hmm.
have the rest read for a final video.
Gotcha,
For
gotcha. Yeah, well, yeah, so that might pause a little bit of what I was gonna say in relation to this. I did notice one thing, Jeff, that these we go back to that main Greg Smallwood artist after
right.
9, and they keep going for like I think like another 8 issues with just Greg Smallwood again. So I don't know if like we theorized this was a thing about Greg Smallwood's, you know, uh,
I don't
his
know.
speed at drawing or his schedule, or sometimes it does, certainly like the level that comic art is at now, often a regular artist has to have like a little time to get ahead on issues, that it's like very hard in today's day and age to do a full issue a month, depending on like how kind of intricate the artist's art is. So I could still see this being something where they're like, ooh, this will give us a way to get ahead. But I
Sure.
thought it was very pleasing, especially like when the
Pretty fun.
intercutting, instead of going page by page, it starts happening mid page and stuff like
Cutting
that.
back and forth.
Yeah.
It was cool. This it definitely feels like the episode we just watched was very much inspired by this, because of the
Yeah.
way it intercuts to the stuff with Ethan Hawke, Harrow, right? Talking to him, which, by the way, like none of that makes any sense to me at all. Like I just a quick backup. I remember at the end of last episode, I was like, it feels like they just didn't know what they were doing, and so they just, hey, we're in a brand new spot and everything. So I really appreciated that he was dead and that he was in the underworld. I was like, okay,
Mm,
so this is actually a through line of that. And then when they would go back to the sort of Harrow scenes, kind of like the comic is cutting back and forth, right? I
right.
was like, why are we here? What is this, place in his head? But I thought it was an effective way to give us more information. It kept it intriguing. And again, Ethan Hawke just keeps killing that performance. And like I said,
Mm,
there were some incredibly emotional scenes between those two together. Like again, that is their fighting. So even though it didn't make sense to me necessarily, like I guess it is Ed or something, it was still really cool to watch, and I was glad it's there. So anyway, I'm just saying that I think was inspired by what we're seeing in this comic with the very quick back and forth.
right. Totally. And that's like another thing that, yeah, we'll have to be basically wrapped up in, the potential last episode of the show, is this, that is a separate plot line that's still dangling. The is it real, is it not real,
Yeah.
which they're keeping that ball in the air, much like I don't think, again, you haven't read to the end of issue 9, but I don't think they're necessarily keeping that ball up in the air in this comic, where it really does feel like the desert being everywhere in New York is the real thing that's happening.
Right. Yeah.
But
Comic, just so everyone knows. Yeah.
yeah, in the comic, and that feels like the real thing. But this
Right.
did feel more pleasing, though I will say my favorite parts are the wolf. I mean, how fun was this wolf thing?
There you go.
Werewolves have taken over the whole earth. They've
So
gone to the
ridiculous.
moon. This is Jeff. This is purely, and I was thinking about you when I was reading this. Like my pleasure about this batshit insane wolf part.
Right.
I'm
Right.
like, I don't think they do this in fantasy the way they do it in comics, where it's just goofiness, but like there is just something so pure about this level of goofiness. And it is self-aware. They kind of like comment on it within the comic, like the very comic booky dialogue, right? The like very almost, this like cliche sort of villain speak and all this stuff. But
I enjoy that.
yeah, but honestly, you could feed that shit to me straight in a comic book, and I love it. Like, there's something so kind of pure and wholesome, and I think something that it like goes back to, just like a kind of childhood enjoyment of something.
Right.
But also, I think what comics do with it, I love that kind of tone of very clipped or very telegraphed or over the top type dialogue when it's combined with a lot of wild imagination. Like, you have that wild imagination in it. I this way I feel a little bit the same about Sam Raimi. Like, a lot of Sam Raimi's tone is often very like cheesy, over the top. The humor's really big. The way everything's delivered is really large. But then, like, if it has the imagination, and I think in Sam Raimi movies, if it has the visual flair that he does,
Right.
it
Right.
makes everything, it just fits it all together in a way that you're like, I love how bonkers this is, and it makes that tone work. Whereas in other things that maybe were shot normally or weren't so kinetic, you would be like, ugh, this is really cheesy and lame, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying about how big a role the visuals play. I do think there is something quasi similar to that within the realm of fantasy. Well, my initial reaction is in terms of like a crazy aside for something we've read. That seems to me like the random dreams with the dark one. You know what I mean? Like, and there's like a random like craziness thing. But in terms of more of like just a fantasy aesthetic, I would agree. I think there's certain tropes that I would happily, just see again and again. You can give me a young person on a farm who discovers their chosen in 10 different series, and I'll happily read them.
Oh
You know,
God, no!
if the
Please
story is
kill
good.
it, burn it with
You know,
fire. Don't, no
yeah,
more, no
I'm
more.
just like, but the point here is that like I think that does exist, and also more to a similarity. I think that writing style is more sort of equatable to visuals, and so I can
Mm,
see people writing in kind of this olden, like Tolkien-esque style in their stories, which some
mm.
writers do, which I think evoke a particular feeling of an age or a time period that is very satisfying. So I think there can be overlaps, even though obviously the mediums are not identical.
Yeah, I mean, so I just love this goofy shit, is what I'm
I tell
saying,
you that.
and
I'm like, what
especially,
does this have to do with the plot? I'm like, how is this? What is happening?
who
But I do
cares?
like
It's
the
awesome.
intercut. I do. Listen, don't get me wrong. If it was just a thing about space wolves taking over and transforming people into wolves, sure. One of my
Yeah.
favorite, I think, was it a Scooby Doo or something? But it was like the vampire army versus the werewolf army, but it was like kind of tongue in cheek, and it just was never ending because a vampire would bite a werewolf and they turn into a vampire, and a werewolf would bite a vampire and they
Oh.
turn into a werewolf, and so it's just like this, never ending fight. And so, like, listen, I'm about what this is if that's just what it is. But I think I know I'm not going to get like a satisfying arc or story associated with these space wolves. So it just feels like kind of like a throwaway besides the visuals and the overlap. So that's just my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I actually think the opposite. Like, I do not need this to like wrap up cleanly in some, satisfying way. I just think it's like fun on the page. It is like a
It's
fun
fun. It's fun.
idea,
It's
and
fun.
just like throwing it out there with this like very kinetic, very crazy art is just, I just love it. And it doesn't really like
Okay.
the ship's landing and all these werewolves are jumping out. It's awesome. It's so fun. And again, going to my theory here that that the writer literally must have just said, James Stokoe, what do you want to draw? And I think he just created this whole idea. Or
Sure.
I wonder if they even did something like Marvel method a little bit. I mean, I guess not so much because he does this bite and then that's like that's kind of the transition. It's not even really
Yeah.
the transition. It's in the transition to Steven's part in the next
Later it
issue.
happens in the next
Right.
issue. Yeah, yeah.
But
Which again, I like it as a transitional device for sure, and I like it as a device to have him question, his reality. And I thought some of the lines, I think it's in this issue about like, I don't know what's real, the wind feels real or real enough. You know what I mean? Like,
mhm.
and to be that out of sorts that you're literally just using the feeling of wind on your skin to decide, okay, this must be real. I thought that was cool, and so it did feel timely that we were reading these, even though it did not seem like the comic really lined up with the show. These particular issues did. In that, Stephen, Mark questioning, who they are, what's happening, and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, but I feel like with James Stokely, I would almost not have been surprised if they did a true Marvel method. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Marvel method,
Yeah.
but
I
basically
don't
when
think so.
Marvel first started, Stanley was writing everything. Like literally every comic was written by Stan Lee. So nobody can do that, right? So
Sure.
basically what he did was he'd be like, "Oh, he'd meet with the artists, they would together like come up with like what the plot is going to be, and then he'd just go, "Okay, Jack, go draw this." And Jack would just draw the whole thing and kind of do whatever he wanted as far as like the pacing or like the layouts or this how the story beats are presented. Then he would bring it back in, and then Stan would add the captions and the dialogue
Huh.
based on what he did, and that's basically the way that they were able to keep the pace on the comics with Stan quote unquote writing every single issue. And this
Right.
feels,
Wild.
at least for the James Stocco part, feels similar. Oh my goodness! Sorry, everybody. Let me
Okay.
get
All right.
a
Do you
little
get
drink
choked up
right here. Okay, I'm
talking
getting
about
choked up
Stan,
about. Well,
talking about
thinking about
Jack?
Stan, yeah, I get choked up.
It's understandable.
But this feels the same because these other plots do feel like more tied in with like the personalities, Stephen Grant personality, Jake Lockley
Yeah.
personality. The Mark Spector personality is this werewolf thing, which like okay is related to Moon Knight in a way, and he did show up in Werewolf by Night originally, but it just doesn't have anything to do with anything.
Nothing to do with anything.
and it's aw- and
Nothing.
it's and it's awesome. And then like they do kind of
Yeah.
spoilers for issue 9 for you, but they do kind of just dispatch with it, pretty right away.
I
Um,
was gonna say the one thing about that artist, I really that with that shot, I was like, who is this holding his neck? So, but I will say
right.
that I like the back and forth, but this I don't know who is doing the art for that one.
Hmm.
But some of those shots really did feel out. I mean, again, I like how they did back and forth with this one in it. But I think this is the other artist who does because
Yeah,
this artist
yeah.
is the yellow and blue artist who does
Right.
all the like the cab stuff. But
Exactly.
yeah, we just talked before about how this artist was sort of kind of the weaker of them, and sometimes it would lead to confusion in terms of who am I looking at because certain characters
Yeah.
look kind of similar to each other. But
There was some
we knew
confusion.
probably that.
There was some confusion right here with me where I wondered uh oh no, maybe it was somewhere else where like I felt like a balloon got misplaced or the tail to a dialogue bubble got misplaced
It's when they
because
both turn, right? It's when
right.
it's right after this. Yeah, that one totally threw me. I'm like, wait, but the guy does complain, but
Oh,
it's like,
right, right
it's
here.
right there at the
Right.
bottom. So I think what's supposed to happen is that the guy says that and then they turn, but that doesn't seem to make
Ah,
sense either. I think they both are turning to someone saying that to them.
right. I That's what I thought. I thought
Yeah,
it was like Steven saying that to
yeah.
them because he says cut. Oh, but no, then the guy in black says, "Look, I'm
That's,
sorry, but this dialogue stinks." So yeah, he
but
did say that, but it doesn't
yeah,
make sense for them to turn their heads yet
it
until
doesn't
the
make sense for
cut.
them to get
Right.
a cut, right? He should be saying it. They should get a
Right, right,
cut, and then
right,
they should
right.
turn their head. So yeah, it seems like they
Right.
try to cram it too quickly.
A
Or,
little
or like
too.
you're saying, if it was the Marvel method, the guy just had them turning their heads, right? So I can see from the artist's perspective that it makes sense, right? From the
Mm,
artist's perspective, he's showing these two coming at each other and then they turn because he's setting up for the cut, right? But it seems like the person who decided on the dialogue just didn't quite match it up.
right. To quite.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be there. It should be on the previous panel or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
for
but
sure.
yeah. So Yeah, and again,
I
the
like the
thing with
local.
oh
Sorry, go
yeah, again we're seeing like the door opening and the motion of that with the motion of so
ahead.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean they line up. There are parts where you're like, okay, we definitely did line stuff up this way. Although I think I was confused about this too. Who comes through the
Yeah,
door?
yeah, the guy from the version of him that's the movie producer or whatever comes into the space
Ah,
land is what I think happens.
right. And then but then he comes through another
And then he goes
door.
back. Yeah, he's like goes back the way he came, I guess.
Oh, and then that this is not the movie set. This is where Midnight Man is real.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, you get a lot with the cross cutting of not like worrying about it too much. God, I'm not the kind of person to pour over this and make sure it lines up exactly. It's pretty fun with that effect of the cross cutting, and then boom to the big exclamation point too that Greg
Right.
Smallwood really is enjoying in this series of making the exclamation point panel. But hey, there you go.
First of
At
all,
the end of the
of the
issue, exclamation point. I dig it. I'm into it.
I mean, I thought it was great. I like this, and obviously, I really like this artist. And I like this scene of them all coming through the doors and him being like, "We got to talk." So I thought this was a cool ending for this, with something that I had felt had sort of gone off the rails. So I guess in a way, it mirrors the show, right? Like in the show, I was like, "What is happening?" in the last episode, but this most recent episode, I thought they pulled it together, and I thought that this, despite its craziness, did pull things together. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll keep going with it. I do
Yeah.
wanna. We only have one more episode, so I don't know how much further through Jeff Lemire's run we'll get. I am interested that I'm gonna keep, especially with this artist, through the end of his. I think Greg Smallwood and Jeff Lemire both stop after issue 18, and
Yeah,
they
so
bring
what I
in a
think.
whole new creative team.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe we'll try to go through them, or at least the conclusion of this arc. Though I think this arc concludes in the next issue, right?
Yeah, this arc, I mean, concludes in the next issue, but it's like we've hardly
Right.
kind of wrapped up the
Got
whole
it. Got it.
story.
We'll definitely be talking more Moon Knight comics in our final Moon Knight TV show episode next week.
Yeah, sounds good, everybody. Well, we will see you then. Please like, subscribe, do all the things. Give us a comment. Let us know if you're liking this show as much as I am liking this show. Let me know if you spot any plot holes that. No, I don't care. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me
Let me know the plot holes.
that.
Say
Let
it.
Jeff know. Let Jeff know the plot holes. And
Just let it. Just let it.
we will see you next week, everybody.
See you then.
Bye.